I had a student ask me about a couple of questions in the 10.2 homework, and I thought I would just make a video to show you how to do them. This one is going to use a chi-square test for goodness of fit to test the hypothesis that a coin is biased. And so remember that the null hypothesis is always the assumed condition, so we're always going to assume a coin is not biased, like we assume innocence in a court of law. And if it was not biased, then we would expect the probability of success or landing on heads is 50%, and then versus the coin is biased, and that would be not equal 50% because I'm not saying one way or the other. Then I ask for my chi-square test statistic, and so I'm going to go ahead and open StatCrunch, and I'm going to go to Stat. Good. Oh, I'm not able to use that test yet. I need to input my observed column and my expected column. Remember that chi-square is going to test whether my observed information meets what I would expect. In this case, I had 33 heads and I had 47 tails. What I would expect to happen is to have 40 heads and 40 tails. I'm going to go to Stat, goodness of fit chi-square test so that I can get my chi-square test statistic. My observed column is what I put in observed. My expected column is my expected. If I hadn't put those values of 40 in there, I could have clicked all cells in equal proportion, since in this case every cell should be the same. But I did put it in, so I hit expected. Notice it gives me my observed and expected. It gives me my chi-square test statistic of 2.45 and a p-value of 0.1175. So 2.45. My p-value is 0.118, rounded to 3 places. And I'm testing that against a 0.05 level of significance. My p-value is larger, so I will not reject the null hypothesis. If I do not reject the null hypothesis, then there's no evidence to conclude that the coin is biased. We have to assume it's still not biased. Alright, this one's very similar. I'm going to again go to StatCrunch. I'm just going to pull it over and change my observed and expected from my last test. I'm going to show you how to use that other column too by not putting in an expected. So in this case, I'm going to have 8, 23, 26, 25. And then I'm going to have 34 and 34. And since this is rolling a die and we're seeing if the die is fair or not, my expected value should all be the same. That should be the number of rolls, which is 150 rolls, divided by the 6 possible outcomes. Let me get rid of that. Alright, so let's go back to this question. So again, we are testing whether the die is fair. That's my assumption, versus the die is not fair. And it looks like there might be some evidence that it's not fair with that 8. That seems very small, but we're going to test and see. Look at that. They already gave me my chi-square numbers. I wouldn't really even have to calculate this. I can just pick this right off that 18.24. Oops. But if I wanted to, I could calculate that in StatCrunch. I would go to Stat, goodness of fit, chi-square test. My observed column is all the observed values I saw. I don't have an expected. I'm going to hit all cells in equal proportion. Now be careful. You can only click that choice if you're not testing that it's the same in every cell. For instance, when you do the Stradivarius violin question, that's 1 out of 5. And so it's 20% and 80% versus all the same. Notice it does that for me. It gives me that 18.24 and 0.0027 as a p-value. And so in this case, that's very small. I will reject the null hypothesis. So there is sufficient evidence to say that the die is not fair. Please keep emailing me and clicking those Ask My Instructor questions.